KD's up, says, thanks for helping answer my question last week about PR specific schema. I'm still stuck on what URL to enter in the generator. On technicalseo.com, if I select article schema, then leave the URL property field blank, the schema reports a warning when tested. Yeah, you don't want to leave it blank. Says, I'm worried about causing ambiguation in the data, so just don't want to put the wrong info here. I read that for a schema.org thing, like an article, the URL property should always point to the same URL because everything has exactly one preferred or canonical URL. This makes it sound like the URL I enter into the generator should be the URL of the PR itself, which does not yet exist, which is correct, since Press Advantage has not yet published it. So do we publish the PR with schema that contains the warning, or do we enter a different URL into the generator? Thanks. I would just publish with the organization page URL, right? Because that's going to link, it's going to basically be pushing back to the index page, the newsroom, the media room, essentially, that has all of the articles published on Press Advantage in your organization, right? Because you're right, you don't have the URL yet. Now, maybe that's something that we could find out from, we could request from Jeremy, the developer of Press Advantage, is to display when you order a new PR, like when you go to order a new PR, that it could display what the URL is going to be for that press release in the editing phase of it or whatever. Because here's the thing, remember, the URL is determined by the title, right? There's the PR number after pressadvantage.com / and then it's the actual press release number, I believe, for that order. And then after that, it's the slug from the title that's generated from the title. So maybe, and I don't know that this is possible, but it could certainly be asked, that could be like a preview, or it could be dynamically inserted after the press release has been initially written. Again, I don't know that that's going to happen. In the meantime, you could just link back, unless Marco says that that's wrong, would be to link back to the Press Advantage organization page. What do you think, Marco?
That's what I would do if the URL is not existent at that point. Then you have to point to something else, or you get that error. But I mean, you could always switch that out, can't you? I think that.
Well, no, because once it's published, you can't edit the schema that's appended to that particular PR.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll have to talk to Jeremy about this and see what we can do. He's really good about fixing this.
Yes, very much so.
Good, really good.
Very much so. And so here's the news article schema, right? And by the way, besides the plugin that I teased last week, we've got another app potentially coming out soon too that will do all the schema you could ever need. It's incredible. It's really cool. So we'll be talking about that in coming weeks as well. So this is just an interim tool. But if you see this, the URL she's talking about is right here. And by putting in the organization page URL, it's saying the main entity of page. So that's the schema that's just, so let me show you what I mean. If I cut this out of here, it's the news article schema.org. But the moment that you put something in for the URL field, it brings up this main entity of page type, right? So that's why I'm saying it says @type web page and then @ID. Well, the ID can point back to the organization page, right? Because the organization page, and this will break my browser because I've got my embedded iframe loop. But what does this ID page have on it? It's got pretty much all the entity validation for that organization anyways. Does that make sense? It's got the NAP, the Google Map, embedded website, social media, perhaps an embedded iframe if you've got that. So my point is, I think that should absolutely work, right? What do you think, Marco?
I totally agree.
So there you go. That should help you with that. She says, Brian, actually, let me finish this question and then we'll jump back to Brian's question. She says, just to add quickly, the schema markup generator is also asking for image URL. So far, all the images embedded in my PRs have been hosted by Press Advantage. So I'm not sure how the Press Advantage image URL would get added into the PR schema, either since the hosted image URL does not yet exist and schema code has been submitted to Press Advantage before they publish the PR. I see Press Advantage just released a feature to allow external image URLs to be added. So is that the only way? That's a good question. I would, if you have, I know with the external image Yeah, you could do it that way. So if you have the image hosted somewhere else and you give them the URL for it that way, then you could use that same image there. Typically, the way that my blogger does all the press releases for my clients or for my own projects is we publish a blog post first, right? And then we use the press advantage or press releases to promote a blog post, and that gives us and then we also usually do a GMB post, for example. So we kind of create, like co-citation between a press release or press releases, blog post, which is a deep link, right? A deep internal link from the website, as well as GMB post. And that's what we link to. So the URL of the image can be pulled from the blog post, right? So like the hosted URL image from the blog post, we can use that, for example. So that's typically how we do it. If you're trying to use, you could also pull an image from a Google Maps listing, for example, right? So for example, if you've uploaded a photo I'm just assuming that if it's for local, let's just put it that way. You could upload a photo to Google Photos for the GMB, right? So in the GMB as a photo, and then you could go pull the share URL from that photo and use that, right? If it's the same image that's going to be in the press release anyways. One word of caution: I don't like, if you're going to provide the image to Press Advantage already hosted, make sure it's sized properly. So in other words, if you've got a big image somewhere that you've uploaded to WordPress or to Google Photos for the GMB, for example, or even just flat out Google Photos, if it's a large image, what happens is, and I know this because I just tested this, the image will come out as large as whatever the original file size is when it gets published as in the press release. So sometimes the image bleeds way outside the actual content body of the press release because it's so big. So just keep in mind that you want to resize those images to, I typically don't like them to be any wider than 600 pixels, maybe 650 pixels, so that it will fit nicely inside the PR and it doesn't get, bleed outside of that. Do you see any problems with that, Marco?
No, I mean, this is another question that has me a little confused because like a PR doesn't sit in a bubble. You're going to syndicate information, because that's how I say you're going to produce news or information about something else. Correct. Something else that should have images, that should have CTAs, that should have video, just whatever, like a post, right? A GMB post. It has a URL. The image will have a URL. Everything has a URL. It has to have a URL. And so if the image URL that you can use is one of those, since it belongs to your entity anyway, it's yours. Google will know that all of these little associations that you can make are what cinch everything. And it's something that I'm testing right now. That it's something really intricate, but it works really well. Once it's set up, then you just push go. I mean, it just does a great job of pushing everything into the 3-pack. And the way that that's done is by creating, as you said, all of this co-occurrence and all of this these co-citations, these naked URLs and just URLs in text without even getting linked in. I mean, those all count, believe it or not. And again, if it's from a post, then that post image has a URL. Yeah. And if it's from a GMB, then that image should have a URL, or it should be uploaded to Google so that you get the Google URL in there, or the Google Photos URL, whatever Facebook. If you have an image in Facebook, you could use that because it's yours. Anything and everything that you can do to promote your brand is what you should be doing.
Right. And that's what, so this is why I wanted to demonstrate this. So that's the image URL here. Now, if you take a look, this is the published press advantage, or excuse me, press release that has, I used the self-hosted image, right? So in other words, I provided an image URL for Press Advantage to use. Now here it looks fine, but when it's republished on some of the other sites that, some of the other media sites, it's a big image that bleeds over, and it might not be this press release, might be one of the other ones, but it bleeds way outside of the actual, text area. So that's why I recommend that you resize it. But if you take a look, if I right click on this and say copy image address, this is the image address right here. If you take a look, I know it's probably small, but that's my alphalandrealty.sale site, which is the site that I use for selling the properties that I have for sale. So this is a self-hosted image on my selling site that I provided that URL to Press Advantage to embed into the press release. Does that make sense? So I didn't upload this image to Press Advantage. I provided them with the already hosted image URL, which then they inserted into the press release. So that right there is the same URL that I could add right here if I was going to be promoting that particular press release, excuse me, writing the news article schema for that particular press release. Does that make sense? So, and again, I like doing that because if now that image URL, once again, it's referencing another one of our entity assets. If that makes sense. So that's how you resolve those.